United Nations Earth Summit, Agenda 21. Yeah, Agenda 21. They refer to it as sustainable development. Well, that sounds good. It might change your mind when you hear a little bit of the background of sustainable development. Here's how Agenda 21 is defined by the United Nations. A comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations system, governments, and major groups in every area in which humans impact the environment. It has been adopted by more than 178 governments. I believe there's only 191 on the planet. But it sounds harmless. It's only Agenda 21. Yeah, go look this one up, because it's not so harmless. It doesn't get spooky until about here. Just section 1. Social and economic dimensions, which talks about the redistribution of wealth, changing consumption patterns, promoting health, I love this one, change population, and sustainable settlement. A little later, when it talks about the redistribution of wealth, which we all love, quote, developed countries and funding agencies should provide specific assistance to developing countries in adopting an enabling approach to the provision of shelter for all. So that's like guaranteed housing. Sustainable development is just a really nice way of saying centralized control over all of human life on planet Earth. That doesn't sound bad. It starts to make more sense when you see who's responsible for all of this. The only way to save the world at this point is to have the industrial civilization collapse. So what could be nefarious about what's happening within you? What? Is Glen Beck talking about Agenda 21? How does this matter to you? Well, there is a good chance now your local community officials are actively working on implementing this socialist-created redistribution of wealth, globalist scheme disguised, really poorly, as environmental crusades. The usual suspects are involved just behind the curtain.
The words Agenda 21, ladies and gentlemen, were never meant to be spoken. And if they were, then of course it would be dismissed as a conspiracy theory. Because if people knew Agenda 21 and what it stood for, there's plenty of information out there where they could actually learn what the end game was, and governments didn't want that to be known. Ladies and gentlemen, the origins of the environmental movement as we see it began back in 1968 when the Club of Rome was formed. The Club of Rome has been described as a crisis think tank which specialises in crisis creation. The main purpose of this think tank was to formulate a crisis that would unite the world and condition us to the idea of global solutions to local problems. In a document called The First Global Revolution, authored by Alexander King and Bertrand Schneider, on pages 104 and 105, it stated, "In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers, of course, will be caused by human intervention that will require a global response." That's the origin of global warming, ladies and gentlemen. As I said, the Lima Declaration, which was the blueprint for the redeployment of tools, jobs and manufacturing to the developing nations. To me, that all of these treaties were the foundation for the rollout of Agenda 21. In 1992, former President of the United States, George Bush Sr. said, "Effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced. A major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. This shift will demand that a concern for the environmental consequences of every human action will be integrated into individual and collective decision-making at every level. I want everyone to consider what the words profound reorientation of all human society and unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources actually means. In 1992, Maurice Strong, Secretary General of the UN Earth Summit and member of the Club of Rome, said, "It is clear that current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class involving high meat intake, consumption of large amounts of frozen and convenience foods, use of fossil fuels, ownership of motor vehicles, small electrical appliances, home and workplace air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable." Agenda 21 is about controlling every aspect of our lives: how we eat, what we eat, how much we eat, how we move around, food production, the amount of food, and where we even live. Agenda 21 seeks to establish a mechanism for transferring the wealth from citizens to the third world. Fear of environmental crisis would be used to create a world government and UN central direction. Land cannot be treated as an ordinary asset, controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market. Private land ownership is also a principal instrument of accumulation and concentration of wealth, therefore contributes to social injustice. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, if you work hard and you exercise good financial management and invest in property, you are contributing to social injustice. Individual rights will have to take a back seat to the collective. This segment of our society, who fear one world government and UN invasion, through which our individual freedoms will be stripped away, would actively work to defeat any elected official who joined the conspiracy by undertaking Agenda 21. So we will call our process something else. We will call it comprehensive planning or growth management or smart growth. We ended up with sustainable development. The redeployment of human and financial resources has now become visible to us all via the cut to services and programs to assist the sick, the young, the elderly, and of course the creation of another level of poverty now identified by the term the working poor. I was speaking to a person last week and he said to me, if Hitler was still around, he'd be sitting back thinking, I didn't need bullets for a global takeover. And he'd be right. But we the people have to tighten our belt while the government seems absolutely unaware and unconcerned of the amount of debt that it is accumulating. We're constantly paying for so-called services that we don't receive. This is wealth redistribution at the grassroots level, redeployment of financial resources, ensuring only hardship for the citizens who just really want to get on with their lives. As Agenda 21 became more and more apparent to me, I began using the line in Parliament that government was now declaring war on its own citizens. And that goes back as far as 2008. For way too long now, we the people have been asleep at the wheel, and it is time to wake up and participate in the democratic process. In 1972, the Club of Rome published the alarmist Limits to Growth document, warning of worldwide overpopulation, the need for sustainable development. This was the beginning of the slow process of social engineering and programming people to accept that the planet is struggling to sustain life. This Monetary and Economic Review on page 5, the environmental crisis will be the international disaster that will unlock the new world order, one world government. In 1992 came the Earth Summit, which produced the document called the Earth Charter. That this document would be adopted as the new 10 Commandments, with environmentalism as the new one world religion. Out of this summit came Agenda 21. The total population of 250 to 300 million people is ideal. That means a reduction of 95% from present levels would be even more ideal. Another goal of the depopulation process is that the upcoming generation will submit to sterilisation to save Mother Earth. Ladies and gentlemen, everything I've said here tonight can be verified by document searches, and it is now time for us all to take off our blinkers and encourage our neighbours to take off their blinkers. And every day another law is passed, is introduced to produce the endgame of Agenda 21 being fully implemented. Carbon tax, climate change and Agenda 21. Can democracy survive all three?
Group called American Coalition for Property Rights. And the purpose of their group is to fight a agenda called 750. And this agenda is basically a way for the federal government to come into our lives and change the way the Constitution allows us to delegate what we do with our property.
Working under Presidential Executive Order Number 13575, called the Presidential Council on Sustainable Development, 750's been assigned to nationalize human settlements into a one-size-fits-all model and federalize our living spaces. They hope, without our knowledge, without our vote, without our consent, but with our tax dollars.
So basically what 750 is the federal government overreaching local government.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so constitutionally, basically 750 is illegal.
It contravenes our Constitution.
It does.
It bypasses the state level.
It does.
It is a sustainable community.
Right.
And I found out it's absolutely an opposite end of private property. It is a cluster of low-income, high-density population, housing and urban development, stack and pack high-rises with demographic quotas located next to the high-speed rail service. And they use these government grants to rezone your downtown areas and narrow the streets and pedestrianize them. And eventually, the use of automobiles will not be allowed here. Over time, they tax private property owners in the extreme. This is called a tax sharing basis. They tax the suburbs to pay for this inner city until eventually private homes with their individually controlled air conditioners and irrigated lawns are no longer sustainable, and automobiles with their dirty carbon footprints are no longer sustainable under the new EPA regulation. So over time, they phase out private property and your right to own an automobile.
Okay, so just to be clear, they want to get rid of individual homes for like one family dwellings.
Correct.
Our automobiles.
Correct.
Our lawns.
Correct.
Are these people, are they American?